Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Bella, an Appalachian Love Story, and Jagged Dawn, Logan's Beginnings by Valerie Davisson, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Bella, Chapter 1, 1966, Red Sleeve, West Virginia. Norah. Just start anywhere, Grandma. I want to know everything, Will said. Well, then get comfortable. I'll start with George. It was midsummer when I first saw him leaning against the outside of the church house. Sally told me that young man was Beulah's cousin come to help her daddy clear the land that rose behind their cabin about halfway up the holler. George was a few inches shorter than most of the boys around here and weighed half as much, but I noticed him right away, though I didn't let on. They were fixin' to put in more corn. It was hard work. Too hard for her daddy, who'd cut his leg up last winter and never got the full use of it back. Mountain trees don't give up their roots easy. More rocks than dirt mostly on that mountain, but they needed to clear more land. Beulah's mom had 7 mouths to feed. At 14, Beulah was the oldest. Not me, I was the onlyest child at our place, a thing almost unheard of in the holler. Everybody had near 12 to 20 children back then, but my mommy and poppy drowned in the flood back in '09 before they could make me any brothers or sisters. Grandpa Harley and Granny Louise, who I'm named after, well, my middle name, took and raised me up. Grandpa mostly. Granny took sick and died 2 years afore when I was 12. Still, she taught me most what I needed to know to take care of Grandpa and me. I could make good lye soap, get up a basket out of white oak splits, plant by the signs, put up runner beans and tomatoes for the winter. And berries. We had a mess of blackberries every year. We had chickens and a hog. What we didn't grow or make ourselves, we traded for with our neighbors. It was Grandpa Harley and Granny Louise's sister, Aunt Lila, that taught me the two things I really loved, though, and done me the most good in this life. Medicine and music. And stories. They both could spin a yarn. Nearest doctor was a day's ride by horseback, and nobody we knew even owned a horse, just a mule if they were lucky. Aunt Lila was our doctor. She didn't have a husband or children, so she spent more time learning how to help other folks with theirs, and she did. Herbs, poultices, potions, she could fix or cure most anything. Broke bones, burns, whooping cough, or mountain fever. And what she couldn't cure, she'd soothe just by being there with 'em. Pray with 'em if they were believers. Sometimes that's all you can do, she'd tell me. Just ease a person's suffering. She knew that. The love in her heart was as powerful as the herbs she gathered, the potions she mixed up, or the poultices in her larder. I didn't take to the prayer part. It seemed to me God helped those that helped themselves. He put the plants and such there for us, and it was our job to use the brain he gave us to figure out how to use them. Prayer had nothing to do with it. Leastwise, it didn't save Granny Louise. I tried. Grandpa Harley gave me music. People came from 3-4 hollers away to hear him fiddle. He was so good. I can't remember a night without the sweet sounds he could coax out of a few pieces of wood and string. Lightning fast for dances and weddings and long Scottish wails and lullabies on summer nights playing on the porch for the crickets. He once told me that to him music was food, as filling as Granny Louise's buttermilk biscuits and just as essential. Give you life, or at least make it worth living. I felt the same way, and it's a good thing because we went without biscuits of any kind until I learned not to burn 'em after Granny died. I'd watch Grandpa's fingers fly so fast I couldn't see where they went, and how at other times he pulled the bow across the strings real slow, his eyes closed tight to make a longing, sad sound like you never heard. It would set my heart to thrumming. I could sit for hours and listen to him play. I especially liked it when a thunderstorm would roll down the mountain to back him up. He'd be silhouetted against the black rain clouds, and the wind would whip up his hair, the little bit he had left, that is. He'd play until the cold would make us come inside. Sometimes, when he was out chopping wood, I'd take his violin down and try to copy what I'd seen him do. The first time I did it, Grandpa came a-running, said I'd like to scared him to death. Said he thought a wildcat had got to me with all that screeching. He pretended to be mad, but I knew he wasn't. He said as long as I was going to mess around with it, I might as well learn to play it right. He showed me to tuck it under my chin and how to hold up my arm like a bird's wing. I got better. Grandpa made me this here ladder-back chair so I could sit up straight on the edge of it when I played. I never had no dolls. Didn't want any either, so as long as I could fiddle or wander the hills with Aunt Lila, hunting up roots and plants or mushrooms. Finally, Grandpa told me he was tired of me hogging his, said I needed to get my own fiddle. I thought I'd die. I knew such a thing cost upwards to $7 or $8 in the Sears Roebuck catalog. That don't seem like much now, especially up in the city where you're from, but if it was as high as the moon back then, way out of my reach. Didn't have no money and no way of making any. I don't know how he put up with my hangdog ways that summer, but he kept a poker face on him for weeks. One night after the sun went down, I think it must have been late August, Aunt Lila come over one night and made a fine dinner. Ham bone and beans, greens, and cornbread to sop up the juice. It was one of my favorite dinners, but I hardly ate a bite. But then she pulled something out of her big bag. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a case that it could only hold a violin. She placed it in my hands, said it was from her and Grandpa both. She didn't say how, but she must have saved money up from her birthing trips. She was also the best midwife for miles around. Grandpa must have had a few coins saved, too. They ordered me my very own genuine Stradivarius model violin from the Sears Roebuck & Company catalog. Of course, it was just a cheap thing with a fancy name, but I didn't care. Thought my violin was beautiful. Curly maple back and sides. The kit came with a case, a songbook, and a full set of strings. That summer, I neglected all but my most important chores until I was good enough to play with Grandpa at dances and weddings. My fiddle never did sound as good as Grandpa's. He got his off in a German family moving west. It came from the old country where they knew how to make 'em. I wish I could give you those hours, those pine-filled nights on the porch, lightning bugs dancing in the growing night, the air still soft with summer, but with fall's sharp edge to it, stomachs full, washing up done, wood stove stoked, and Grandpa and me playing up the moon while Aunt Lila rocked content, smoking her pipe. But I was talking about George, wasn't I? Hard to keep the telling on a straight path. There's so much to tell.